joining me on the broadcast is my colleague Meenakshi. Meenakshi is going to be breaking down for us how this particular landing is going to be taking place on the 7th of September. So the details of that event, Meenakshi, that we're all eagerly waiting to see, and what really does happen after. It's over to you to break it down for our viewers.
Well, absolutely. The world is waiting with bated breath. India is just a step away from the moon, just a step away from creating history. Before we talk about how Vikram will land and how the exploration process will start, let's just rewind, take our viewers slightly back to the day when the lander separated from Chandrayaan 2. This is the separation. Once the separation happened here, if you look closely, Vikram has separated from the Chandrayaan spacecraft. It's conducting a lunar orbit. But just as you go close here, if I could just stop the video here, you can see another trajectory has been formed. This is deorbiting. Vikram, the lander, deorbited from the Chandrayaan aircraft and is orbiting around the lunar surface. These are two orbits. One is where Chandrayaan, the spacecraft, is orbiting, and in the next you have the lander which was orbiting. Then the lander for the past few days has been scanning the lunar surface. That's going on right now as well. The lunar surface is being scanned. It has to be an optimal position, an optimal place for the lander to land on the moon also. It has to see where it can land. This is an animation, of course, the animated video of the Vikram lander. Once it has scanned the landing site, there are, of course, some craters on the lunar surface as well. So once it's going to, look at the entire lunar surface and then look for the optimal landing site, one that has been done, then the deboosting procedure would continue. Vikram is going to then start descending. The lander is then going to start landing. That's going to take about 15 minutes to land. But the trick here really is to reduce the speed. It's extremely crucial that it's a soft landing. It's the speed has to be optimal. That is the biggest challenge in front of ISRO. Once the landing space has been found, reducing its speed, Vikram is going to land on the lunar surface. Now this is the lander. Once the landing is done, it will start sending signals back to the Earth. It's sending signal back to ISRO in that animation. Once it gets a go ahead, the nods there, this flap is going to open. That's where the rover is going to start, separating. It's going to come out of the Vikram lander. This is also very crucial. It's going to take about 3 hours for Vikram to open this flap and about 4 hours for the rover to just descend down Pragyan to reach the lunar surface. Now, once Pragyan reaches the lunar surface, what happens then? It's going to commence and start the exploration process. The exploration process is going to last 14 days as India is attempting to land on the south lunar surface. This is where the sun shines, there's light only for 14 days. So that's the time which rover Pragyan also has to scan the lunar surface. The idea to look, of course, for water and for other minerals. If India does this, then certainly it's going to be a historical feat. Now, now that we have looked at the entire process, let's take a look at the details. Details about the lander Vikram, details about the rover as well. Now, this is the lander. If I could just zoom in and show. This lander has, 4 wheels. These are cushioned, these are padded. We'll be looking at them, in greater details also. These, wheels are padded to ensure that the velocity, it's reduced, and when it lands, the Vikram lander lands on the moon, it's an extremely soft landing. What's extremely important is that the rover inside this lander should not get disturbed or harmed in any way. This is a closer look. Look at the wheels here. They have been cushioned. This red thing which you see, these are the cushions. This is the padding which has been provided on the wheel. The idea, of course, to ensure that the landing is soft. This thing which you see here is of course the rocket in the lander Vikram. This is the flap via which the rover will come out. This is the rover. This is a model of Vikram which ISRO had released. Now let's take a closer look at the rover. The rover, first of all, what's the weight of the rover? It weighs 27 kgs only. This again, as I was mentioning earlier, is a picture which has been provided by ISRO. The weight of the rover, that's 27 kgs. Now, if we look at the rover in closer details, let's look at this model. The rover is solar panel enabled. This is going to run by solar power. This is a solar panel which is attached to the rover. When this rover lands on the moon's surface, it's going to have 14 days. That's the amount of time when the sun shines on the southern side of the moon. It's going to use that sunlight to commence its exploration process. Now, what all does the rover have? Let's take a look at this in greater details. One, it is laser induced breakdown stethoscope. What does this mean? It is going to be empowered with laser power, and it will be able to break down and look at anything it sees on the moon very, very closely. It's going to be a very close microscopic look. Also, it has been made by a laboratory for electro-optic system. This laboratory is in Bengaluru. This is again an indigenous, of course, a fully indigenous product. You have the alpha particle induced X-ray stethoscope as well. Of course, the rover has alpha particle induced X-rays. It's going to be extremely crucial. When it does reach the lunar surface, of course, it's going to have to commence its exploration. It's going to look for water and minerals. There could be some unexplored items which the rover does come across on the lunar surface. So this X-ray, of course, is going to help the rover with this. Who has made this? This has been made by a physical research laboratory in Ahmedabad. So I was mentioning earlier, of course, a completely indigenous, of course, this is a product. Now, this is just to give our viewers an idea of what the southern lunar surface of the moon looks like. You have, of course, major craters. You have Copernicus, you have Kepler. These are, of course, the known craters which we have studied about, in our school. These are the major craters which one can, of course, the layman also knows about them. Why are we talking about it? Because when the lander is closer to the lunar surface, it will have to look for an optimal site to land, and this is where it's going to scan and look for all these craters. This is a picture. This is a much clearer picture. Also, it's going to give you a sense of how close we are to creating history. Here you can see the lunar craters which had been captured by Chandrayaan. These were the latest pictures which had been, of course, published by ISRO on their web page, on their Twitter feed as well. This is what the rover, the lander rather, is going to look at when it gets closer. You, of course, have Apollo, you have Mare Oriental. These are, of course, known major craters. When we speak about the landings which have happened on the moon, you have the US, you have Apollo 15. This is the central side. If you look at the map, this is all the US. So the US mostly landings have happened, of course, on the central side. Northern, you have China, you have Russia as well. But the southern side of the moon, this area is completely unexplored. So if that landing happens, if it goes of course, we're all keeping our fingers crossed and we are sure it will happen. So once that landing happens, once Vikram lands on the moon, that soft landing happens, India will, of course, create history. We're going to charter this completely unexplored territory of the moon. Now, when we are speaking about the landing site, what's going to be the landing site? It's going to be between two craters. We're going to look at that as well. The latitude, of course, is 70 degrees south and the longitude is 20 degrees east. This is the exact landing site. Of course, K7 had earlier said their plan is to explore this unexplored region, which is, of course, close to the lunar southern pole. History, of course, going to be created. Now, if we zoom in and look more closely, this is the exact landing site between Manzinus Sea and Simplus N. These two craters, this is a zoomed in picture, and this is the exact landing site. This is exactly where between these two craters we are expecting, of course, the Vikram to land. Now, once we have spoken, about this landing, what are we expecting to explore? Let's look at it in greater detail. These blue dots you see, all this blue is a hope that we could see water. This is what the hope is, that we'll be able to discover water and maybe some minerals on the moon as well. This is, of course, an imagery of the lunar side of the moon as well. This is an completely uncharted territory. We're not too sure what we'll find, but traces of water, looking for mineral is what, the rover, in fact, the entire project is aimed at. That is, of course, the aim. We know a little bit about the topography as well. There are, of course, speculations that there could be some minerals. This is a deep end side. This bluish side you can see is the south lunar side. So, of course, this is a historic feat which India is hoping to achieve. We'll, of course, have to wait and watch till the 7th of September between 1:30 and 2:30, 1:55 to be precise, is when we are expecting Chandrayaan 2 to launch, or rather land on the moon's lunar south surface.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.